All right, and so we just finished up with the first hour, and now if anyone has any questions about anything we covered here, the try and catch or error level or exactly what is explaining in depth what a runtime error is, if you don't understand what that is.
I can see that James Ford, he raised his hand, or maybe wants to say something.
I can't see him. No, I'm kidding.
I don't know. It's just a thing. Is that on? It's actually, I'm seeing it on my screen.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Jim, you want to unmute yourself? If you have a question.
Hey, there you go. All right, I'm here. You hearing me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Actually, I wanted to go back to one of your first slides. It had to do with, and I'm speaking from being a corporate developer for a number of years and addressing some best practices around error capturing, which is good for all the reasons you guys have enumerated. I want to go back to error messages quickly for a second. If you've got a rather large application, it certainly makes sense to have the error messages be informative. But quite often, as you said, you're dealing with users who wouldn't know what the error was. And so what you're really doing is providing an audit trail for yourself so that when somebody calls, you know what happened. In some larger applications, it's actually good to number your error messages. You may have several times where you're using this, end of file reached before expected or something like that. It happens in 3 different places. You certainly want to know which one the user is seeing. And that includes essentially the same way that as Joe and Jackie were showing, we're talking about kind of expanding the error capturing. You're doing this for yourself as the developer, so you want to capture all the stuff that you can around the error to provide you later on the ability to debug what happened. And that could mean that you want to gather up some more information for yourself along the way. A good example of this is quite often errors happen very deep in code. One of the best is something like division by 0. Okay, you can't divide by 0 in any programming language on the planet, except for APL, which would allow you to do it. However, once you've gotten to division by 0, it's probably not that function that's really the error. Somebody passed a 0 to the function, and that was wrong. And so you need to capture some stack information. This error, these breadcrumbs and other error collecting can be quite complicated because you want to pass back up to the function that called it, pass back up to the function that called it. So quite often I find myself spending an afternoon making my error capturing more robust. And so you can spend quite a bit of time doing this kind of thing. I had something else I was going to say, and I did write it down. The other thing is, again, what do you do once you've gotten the error? If at all possible, don't quit. Try to keep going as best you can. And that, again, quite often is difficult as I'd ask questions about where that return after the one error had occurred. Clearly, with try and catch is the only way to be really controlling what the destiny of the program is after the error has occurred. That's my 2 cents.
I'd like to get a little feedback on you on that, Jim. That was some good stuff. As far as when you talked about capturing other stuff, I get some of it of you want to know about the script you're running in, this and that. But my question is, do you also try to look at like your Windows environment or possibly even other getting a snapshot of what other programs were running? How far out do you go?
That's a good question. As far out as you need to, whatever you find is useful, and usually that's on a as needed, but what do I want to say? You add things as they come up.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah. You don't know, so you start off a little bit, and then dial it up or bigger when you have to.
But that's a great example of give me back the Windows version, give me back the AHK version, give me back the resolution, anything from your system that you want. But think of that as somewhat of an object or something that you're trying to then get back to you as a developer who may be asleep in another country when the problem occurred.
Which actually lends itself really well because AutoHotkey is so great at being able to get so much information natively, right? It's not that hard to go get some of the stuff.
Right. I wanted to say also that what I'm really talking about is some of this capturing for instance, Joe, you work with Python. You know that when you crash out of Python, it gives you the whole stack. where you called into. Well, AutoHotkey is not going to give you that automatically. And so building it yourself may require you building some somewhat robust error tracking, environment tracking, let's call it. Where are we? What called me? What were the parameters of this or that? And so it can end up being a significant piece of code that's just tracking where you are.
Yeah, I know when I spoke to Joe Winograd about what he does, and he's like, he does an amazing amount of catching the runtime errors, all the stuff. But you're right, he has a library of things he's put together that helps him. So, of course, once you write it once, you can adapt it and borrow it and reuse it.
Exactly.
But yeah, cool.
It's too bad Joe's not on here because I'm sure he would have a lot to say about what he does.
Awesome. Thank you, Jim.
Sure.
Anyone else? So, if you don't have any other questions about this, do you have other, AutoHotkey questions? Anything else?
I was going to jump back in if I could, Joe.
Yeah.
I looked back in my notes, and it was something other important. And you guys touched on it, but I want to hit it harder. If you're really being worried about errors, runtime errors, because you want a robust, bulletproof application sitting on some user's desktop somewhere, make sure that you're checking the return code of anything you do. Anything that can get returned, anything that can get verified. And I even like the idea that you said, maybe the return code came back, but you have an opposite way of verifying. Look at everything. I mean, there's so many calls that in normal programming, I don't ever check the return code. It's never wrong. But if you're doing something at this level where you really want it to be good, check the return code of anything and double check anything that might have gone wrong somewhere.
And if you really want to make sure it's buttoned up, just don't hire me to program it. That's just...
Well, that's a given from the beginning.
No, that's good advice.
Yeah. We had a few people in the chat also. GeekDude with some on-topic stuff with what he did with exceptions, and Dale with some off-topic questions.
Let's GeekDude, why don't you unmute yourself, and I'd love to hear more about what you've done, since it's specifically on what we've covered. We'll start there.
Maybe he left, or maybe he can't find the unmute.
There it is.
Oh.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey.
So it's going pretty well. I just now got my laptop turned on. I've been listening from my phone. So give me a minute to get it hooked up to Zoom.
Cool.
I just want to say that as a person who writes a lot of libraries, I find myself using throw quite a bit.
Oh, okay.
Because the main purpose of throw is to indicate, there's an error that you can't continue from in your code. And if you're the one developing the end application, you have a lot more opportunities to recover from an error. Whereas if you're writing a library, you don't know what the appropriate way to continue might be for whoever's using the library.
Yeah, I've had great use of some of the libraries that I've used that have implemented throw. So yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I'll pop in again with something about, certainly anytime you're dealing with an external program of any kind, double check what it's coming back to you.
Yeah.
A function, you can check the values returned. But if it's a COM object or anything outside of the AutoHotkey environment, you absolutely want to figure out a way of checking that it worked.
Sounds like a really good idea. And I love these things that were added. I can't remember the exact years that this stuff was added, but at least I was a part of the community when they were added. But I've been a small part of the community since 12, I believe. So yeah, 2 years pass quickly.
And Dale, I want you. Oh, actually, you know what? Dale, you hold on, because Brad, can you clarify what you mean by mistakes?
I think he's just talking in general about this stuff.
Well, he missed the first part. He didn't get what throw was.
Perhaps.
Yeah, but it basically it's a way you can, when there is an error, you can control what happens, what message happens, and information that's passed back. I'd say go back and watch the webinar instead of just covering the same thing over again.
Yeah, he just said the same thing.
Okay.
I should watch the full video first. That's fair enough.
And then pick a simple example and just play with it. It's not too hard when you have a really simple example. But yeah, it's pretty valuable. And then now, okay, Dale, what was your off? Well, yeah.
I am muted myself. Am I here?
Yeah, you're
Fair
here.
enough. Yeah.
Okay. I've identified 2/3 of a problem. I just don't know the solution.
Cool.
It just has to do with hot strings. So instead of I like to put things between parentheses. So I have a couple. So I do I want to capitalize what's in the parentheses. So I'll say C for capital, 99 because that's under parentheses, and then S is for space. So then I press TEST, and I have spaces on either side.
Sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
You have something you can share? We can look at it. I think
I'm sorry.
Yeah, let me stop sharing because if you do, it's just so much easier to.
Oh, that's why I was doing it. Right
To
now.
grasp what you're describing. I got lost when you said, "Hi, this is Dale." So
I'm clicking main screen.
Something is coming up.
yeah,
Yeah.
there we go.
So is WordPad up?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, let me just go back here. So I have a hot string that's C for capital, 99 is for two parentheses, and S is going to put a space in there, so it capitalizes. That was supposed to be test.
Yeah.
I'll do it again. So capital 99 space. Oh, it's doing the broken version. Nice. And then there's a capital 99 period where I don't put a space.
Uh-huh.
Well, it's actually jumped ahead in demoing the problem. I had because I had it reversed here. It is showing the problem. If I do this again, capital 99 space, no, capital 99 space, it's there. I press the letter T, it's going to put you'll see T briefly, and then it switches to the letter S.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what's going on? So to troubleshoot it down, I created a separate AutoHotkey file with just some examples in it, and it works fine. That's why there's two icons up here in the system tray. But when I put it in my main file, which is like 7,400 lines long, that's when it breaks, and it gets back to that thing a couple of months ago where it's I press and hold the key and it capitalizes, because that's what it's doing. It's a side effect of this. If I comment this out, it won't do it. So if I were to switch this back, if I unsuspend that and suspend this one, so this, yeah, so capital 99 space test, capital 99 period. It's very straightforward hot string. And I do it with square brackets and curly braces and greater than and less than. So it works fine in like I said, this small thing. But when I had this other one, this was the one where I press and hold the key and it capitalizes it. It becomes a side effect on it. And that's what breaks it. So I don't know what the solution is. I don't know. Can you briefly suspend another one? Or I don't know if I've been explained it clearly or not.
Well, yeah, my question is if you don't use the initial hot string to build your test, so if you just write out the left paren TEST.
This is it here, capital 99 space. I send the two parentheses with the space, and then I back up a little.
But I'd say that stuff over there, that seems to be working. So I'd be looking at the autocorrect because it's the one that's actually doing whatever.
Oh yeah, it's this one
No.
here. If I comment this section out, it won't. It
Yeah.
stops breaking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in any other way, I'd see it. That is the code that has some kind of small error, and if it's acting on your on the inputs that comes from the hot string or what, I'm not sure. I haven't looked enough at the code, but that would be my guess, right? So
Well, it's actually the last letter of the hot string is what it's putting out there when it breaks. It's putting that capital S, or the greater than sign is the shifted, period.
oh, can you try and do that then? Can you try and enter the C99 period? And
Yeah,
then
which
try
one's
and-
active now? Autocorrect is not active, so it'll work
Yeah.
fine. And that's
Okay.
capital, and it will work fine.
Mm-hmm. And if you turn it on and use the one
Right.
with the
If I suspend that, and so it'll be capital 99 period. So the greater than sign is the shifted period. So it's that last character of the hot string that's showing up there. And similar to the capital one. So that's where the capital S is coming from, the last letter of the hot string.
So when you type T, it's actually intercepting the T, but making a shifted whatever character you had.
Well, it'll
before.
show it there briefly, and then it replaces it with an S. The
Oh,
T-
but did it also do that with the higher than sign?
Yes.
Okay.
Capital 99 period, and there'll be a no, it didn't do it. Capital 99 period. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
did it show it?
I didn't actually see the T there, but
No, I'm not seeing it either. No.
I'm just
In that one.
I'm just guessing. I have no actual idea, but it seems as if the T or whatever the next key you press, it probably doesn't matter if it's a T or whatever you type. You'll get that character there, right?
Yes, because it's the shifted value at the end of the hot string.
Yeah.
The greater than is the shifted period.
So over on your autocorrect, if you try and look at that, because I don't know the code well enough. Yeah. There in the key event, you have something there that's making it act on, what's it acting on? Key, the key, just some key. So whichever key you are doing is then changed into whatever you had loaded.
The shifted value.
Yeah. Apparently.
And that's what this key event does.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So it's probably this hotkey, right, that has an issue.
Yeah.
Maybe this hotkey is probably loaded with some kind of value when you get into a key event. What triggers key event?
It's running all the time. It's
Okay,
this
so
loop.
it's running. Okay, so because the key event is actually triggered by the last character of your hot string, it's the one that actually triggers the key event, right? So as soon as you click some key, it will change it with the send input, backspace, shift down, whatever thing that you had loaded as this hotkey. So because your space or whatever actually triggered the key event, when you click T, what happens is that it changes it to whichever thing actually triggered the key event.
I wonder if it's part of this time delay. If I make this time delay, like
if you let's say just where you set key, just above where you set key.
Right here.
Yeah, right before that. If you check key, just with a message box.
Show what it is, you're saying?
Yeah, he should show this hotkey.
What is that? A underscore?
Yeah, this.
Oh, this. Okay.
And then put a % sign before it.
Yeah, it's a variable, yeah. So either make it an expression or yes.
Another space. Then you're good.
There?
There you go.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Well, I should change this back and not
yeah,
You
fair
don't
do
enough.
that yet.
Save that and run it, and then try your hot string again.
So capital. Oh. Well, as soon as I press a letter, it's
Yeah, fair enough.
intercepted. So I press the letter C. 9. Interesting. It has the tildes in front of it.
Yeah, yeah.
And space.
It will probably not act on any of them right now, right? So it sees the S, but
Right.
it actually didn't write the last one for some reason. So you had to press the S 2 times,
That's correct.
which is kind of weird, isn't it? If you
Yes.
did that again, would you have to do it again on the 4th character?
Capital 9 space.
It's interesting that the third thing that you do is that with everything. What if you do the same thing with the period? No, the period is actually written. Only the S is actually captured in that way. It was just weird. I mean,
Yes.
not sure.
Did you see what Capmon wrote? He said, is the hot string interrupting the hot key? And then when it resumes long enough, time has passed and it removes the character and types the previous one.
Yeah, that's about what I believe is happening.
I thought maybe that's so. I was going to try increasing this delay to like 2 seconds. So I have longer time to type. So capital 99 space. Yeah, there we go. And capital 99 period. Yeah, so now I have time. It doesn't time out. It doesn't think like the input key. It's kind of like input is waiting for a key. Almost like, and so that
Yeah.
time that it waits triggers this. So identified the problem.
Yeah, those two should probably be aligned, or yeah, but okay, a wait or a delay of 2.5 seconds is probably a bit too much if you wanted to actually
Right.
be able to work
Right.
when people are typing.
Yeah. Yeah, so I didn't know if there was a way to suspend this when I'm running this hotkey, or this could be a variable, maybe. Make this delay time a variable.
A parameter that you pass to it.
Yeah, something.
Jackie,
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you've looked at this much more closely than I have because I've been only listening. It feels like that this is just the wrong approach. That you kind of go back to square one and attack this in a different way. Am I barking up the wrong tree here?
You probably could, but it depends on what the deeper meaning of whatever he's trying to do with all of this, and we don't really know. But it's an easy way to catch everything that you do is to just set up a hotkey for all of it. But yeah,
Well,
it really does depend on what's happening and the way that hot strings work compared to how you've set up all of your hotkeys here. But yeah, I do believe that the hot strings and the hotkeys here are
interacting.
kind of interfering with one another. Yeah,
I'll continue to wrestle with it. See what I
yeah,
can
a little
figure out.
bit. Yeah,
This was still a really good example of just troubleshooting, though, right? Of identifying where the issue is.
Yeah, because I had a simple hot string. I'm like, why isn't it working? Why isn't it working? And finally, you break it down to just the basic thing.
Yeah, but it may be a simple hot string, but you got a lot of other advanced stuff going on here, which is pretty cool that you're using it.
Well, that's why I created a separate, just
Yeah.
47-line file to test it, and that was working. And then I'm like, oh, it's a side effect somewhere.
You have some, what is it? You have some of these variables, a previous hotkey or whatever, or last pressed hotkey, or time since last pressed. I can't remember all of these variables. But maybe that was one of the ones you could use to make your delay, because I'm not sure actually if the hot string will. Have you tested that with seeing if does the hot string entering the characters trigger your hotkey script? Or that doesn't happen, right? Because you have the tilde there on all of them. It shouldn't. The hot string sending characters shouldn't be able to trigger the hotkeys that you have set up, because you have the tilde there.
Hey,
that's how I believe that works.
I have an overall. Go ahead, Dale. Go ahead and finish.
I didn't know if there was something that would go between the two colons either, that prevents, another call. I know there's one like yourself.
The thing is, it's not your hot string that has the error. Mm-hmm. It is the way that you catch your key event. There's something there.
Yep.
That's. So again, if you look at those last hotkey, previous hotkey, whatever they're called, I don't have the help file open, but they are available somewhere. You could probably figure out a way to actually determine if the last key you pressed was a hotkey you want to act on, or if it's something else.
Oh, okay. I'll give that a shot. Thank you.
I see GeekDude has something he's going to share here in a minute. Hang on here for Dale. Cat Mode also said maybe you can detect the time that has passed. Detect that the time passed is far longer than the intended delay. Interesting. What popped in my head though was, because Dale, correct if I'm wrong, you don't ever want like the stuff you're actually typing like in WordPad. That's going to disappear, right? So I would almost consider going back to what Jim suggested, was maybe we should think of a whole different approach of, hey, you start typing, you have something that you trigger that will actually say, I want it, let's pretend it's an input box. It doesn't matter, right? But something that allows you that what you type, you manipulate entirely in not you're sending keystrokes and up and down and, shift and this and that. Like that's it. I'm not knocking it, don't get me wrong. But because you're doing such advanced stuff, there's much better ways to tweak text, with just reading the file and using file format and all this other stuff, and then end up sending that as, the final thing.
Well, I use WordPad to demonstrate it, and usually it's in email and Outlook that I'm doing.
Sure, but it's irrelevant. I'm just saying.
From the name, it's an autocorrect, right? So he wants it to be something that happens live while he's typing.
Yep.
I understand that fully. So doing stuff with files and all of that won't work. So that's why you have the hotkeys there.
No, it will.
I just looked at.
That's not what I'm not saying we read it from a file. I'm just saying we have it select the input and do stuff in memory instead of sending keystrokes and up down, right? There's other ways to manipulate the text once we have the text value, right?
Yeah, sure. But again, he could also, instead of using shift and shift down and shift up, he could also send the actual capitalized key code instead. So there's a lot of ways to interpret how you'd want to do stuff. This is a simple way of doing autocorrect. That's true. I just looked up the variables, and you have a time since prior hotkey. which is an a underscore variable that you could probably use to check the last time something that you entered yourself was triggered, which might let you actually find a good time to get around these hot string actions.
Yeah, I think sounds like one of those could work.
Yeah.
I'll continue to wrestle with it. You know, sometimes just getting pointed in the right direction is a big help.
Yeah. It's pretty cool though. GeekDude, what you got going on, man?
Let's see if I can set up as the presenter here.
Yeah, I don't know if Dale, do you have to stop? Maybe I don't know if he can overwrite you if I can stop.
You share, pause share, stop share.
There we go.
Stop share. Yeah.
There we go. So you should be able to see my Windows box here.
Yep.
And I pulled up a couple of files where I used throw in my code.
Cool.
Over here in this window is actually the code for my script editor that I'm using. And in this rename method, I'm using throw in 3 separate places.
What is that?
That's my
It's a
phone
phone somewhere. Yeah, exactly.
All right, so this method gets called when I use the file rename function in CodeQuickTester. So if I do that and try to rename this file as, let's say, discord.ahk, I'll get this pop-up here, error, destination file already exists. And that's from this throw line that I have in here. This is an example of a user presenting exception. At the time that I developed this, AutoHotkey didn't have an on error catch-all. If I were to revisit this sometime, and I probably will, I would add an on error to CodeQuickTester that would show a prettier window for the user. Because right now, the user doesn't need to know all of this line information.
Right. Yeah.
All they care about for this error specifically is destination file already exists.
No.
So there are a couple of places in CodeQuickTester where I use exceptions like this to present to the user, but that's not the only way that I use throw in my code. If I go over to chrome.ahk, one of my more popular libraries, I use throw in here in a few places that aren't necessarily user presenting. So in my constructor for when you're starting up the Chrome library, I have a sanity check here that whatever path you provided to put the Chrome profile actually exists. If it doesn't, I throw this exception, the given profile path does not exist. Now, if someone was using my library, they should be able to catch this exception, and their code would handle it by maybe creating a folder and then trying to initialize the library again. But that's not something that my code would be able to know to do, because I don't know where they would want to create the path, or even if they do want to create the path, maybe they actually want it to stop. And there are a few more spots in here, like if it can't find Chrome itself, it throws an exception. I'd say that's more of an unrecoverable exception. And maybe that would be something that they would allow to go through and present to the user, but probably in a nicer dialog window than the one AutoHotkey generates.
Yep.
So I have a few more sanity checks in my constructor here. And then further down, let's see, the constructor for page has a sanity check. In theory, this wouldn't ever fail because page gets built by the class itself. But if for some reason it wasn't able to generate the page correctly, I would like to throw an exception here. See, I have a to-do throw instead of an actual throw.
Very cool, man.
Call function. And the first thing this call function does, it checks to see if it's connected to a Chrome tab. And if it's not, it throws an exception.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that would happen if the user were to close the tab, if you had it Chrome visible. And that's something that could happen at any time. It's not something that you would be able to account for ahead of time. And so what throwing the exception here allows the user of the library to do is to wrap all of their code in one large try, or if they're using an on error, to just catch everything thrown anywhere in their script, that they would be able to see that the tab has been closed or otherwise unreachable, and then be able to either terminate the script or try to restart whatever it is it was attempting to do.
Yeah.
Other languages, such as Python, offer more powerful tools for filtering exceptions. They'll allow you to say, catch only exceptions of this type.
Hmm.
So if I wanted to put my call function here into a try catch block when I use it, I would have to catch not connected to tab exceptions and Chrome indicated error in response exceptions in the same catch block. And that's those two exceptions, those would be handled differently. And the way you can handle that differently is in your catch block, you would say, if exception.message equals not connected to tab, or maybe you have something that checks if it starts with Chrome indicated error. And then if it turns out it was not connected to the tab, you could restart whatever it is. Or if it says Chrome indicated error in response, you can retry just the command that you were trying to do.
With the exception here, couldn't you use the what by using the second parameter of the exception function?
Yeah, you could also do that. There's just so many ways that you can convey information back to the caller using throw. Down here in evaluate, I use throw a little differently than I have in other places. You can see I have throw exception, but then I have a bunch more parameters on here. I specify -1, and I have some JSON code in there. Cannot open help file. I don't actually have AutoHotkey installed on this machine, so give me a moment.
I think I totally get now what you're saying when you write a library in a class and you can allow people to easily see what's either gone wrong or what's happened, and then make a decision programmatically on how they want to handle it. Because you wouldn't necessarily know what in the world they're doing and what they want to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So exception here takes 3 parameters: message, what, and extra. So here I say exception, and for the message, I pass on whatever the JavaScript error message was. And then for what, I specify -1. And this -1 is exceptionally useful for building libraries, using the word exceptionally in a different context. So what -1 here says is that when AutoHotkey shows the error dialog, instead of saying that the error occurred on line 275 here, it'll say that the error occurred on whatever line called evaluate. So what I'm saying here is the problem is going to be in the user's code. So I want to say that the problem occurred where the user put their code.
I had a quick question here, just because you have it open. This is where I was a little confused on the extra in the exception.
Yeah.
Is that's where I got confused? Is that something that you can provide, or that's something that might be provided by whatever is thrown?
I can set extra to whatever I want.
Okay.
And when I run my example that will trigger this exception, you can see how that shows up. So this is one of the chrome.ahk sample scripts. It just starts up an instance of Chrome here and then gives me a dialog where I can put in some JavaScript. I can say 2 + 2, and it'll say results, description for, type number, value 4. But let's say I put some malformed JavaScript, alert, hi, and then I just don't close that out. You can see here it says specifically, and then it puts in all of this JSON formatted object. That is the extra part from throw exception. So for the message, I put response.result.description because that's a much shorter version of it just for you to look at. And it also shows up in the JSON. You can see here down in description, it says syntax error, invalid or unexpected token. That's the same as what it shows up here. That's the message I gave. But then in addition to that, I give the full exception as returned by Chrome. So for someone who's developing a library that actually wants to do something with this, say it's important to them what column the exception occurred on, they would be able to read in that extra data I gave and then do whatever it is they want with that data.
Can you clarify one of the, because you, if I remember correctly, you said on the extra, you said that is something you gave it. Just so to make sure I understand, if you didn't give it that, is it possible that something else might put something there, or is it only if you provide something to it?
If I do not provide any extra information, like if I just comment this out and then pull back up my example and do the same thing, you can see now it says specifically nothing.
Okay. Thank you. It just wasn't quite clear in the documentation to me that if extra is something you have to give it, or it's something that could be available from whatever you're doing. So thank you.
This message box that popped up is custom. I'm doing this in a try catch. So if I take out the try catch here so you can see AutoHotkey's native dialog and compare those. Let's do that real quick. This is without the extra information. You can see the message is still there and it shows a bunch of line number information.
Yeah.
Like I was saying with the -1, it shows the line that the error occurred on to be line 38 from this code.
Yeah, that's great.
I don't know why that's 38 and this is just 8 over here. Slight issue with my script editor. The line numbers weren't syncing up with the rest of the code. Yeah, so because I put -1 in the exception, it shows it is occurring on line 38 of the code that calls the library instead of line 32 inside the library.
Very cool.
All right, so going back to specifying some extra data with the negative AutoHotkey error dialog.
Someone is at the front door.
You can see it says error, and then it says specifically, but it cuts off on the dialog. You're still able to read that information from your code, but for a developer who's trying to debug it, they'll only see this truncated version. So that's why I was using the custom dialog.
Very cool.
Yeah, and that's just because whoever made the built-in one, he chose that, yeah, you shouldn't see more than that amount of characters for that information. So, yeah.
All right. Then I have one more example of where I'm using throw in my code. And this is my Discord bot library. So for a Discord bot library, you're probably not going to have any user presenting errors. So when you would go to use this, you would want to use something like on error to just catch any that weren't caught elsewhere and maybe log it to a file or something. Because bots run on their own. You don't want it to be prompting for a user to hit continue or exit.
Yeah.
No.
So here in this call API, which is the part that communicates with Discord, I have code here which tries to do rate limiting with Discord. Just if you try to send too many messages to Discord in too short a time frame, it'll respond with an error code that says you're sending too fast, and it'll tell you how long to wait before sending again. So this is an example of error handling not using exceptions. This is error handling using the HTTP status code that Discord returns.
Yeah.
So I check, did Discord return a rate limiting error? And if they did they tell me how long before I retry it? And if they didn't tell me how long before I retry it, my code doesn't know how to proceed. That's a kind of an unspecified error state. Do I just don't send the message at all? Or would the user want to write some code that waits a bit longer and then tries again? So by throwing, I allow the user of the library to make that choice in their catch block.
Yeah,
cool.
And then further down, if my code, if it got the message through the Discord, but it's still not a successful code, I again throw an exception because there's some kind of error being returned by Discord. And I don't know what that error might be. If there was a class of error that I could handle, I would handle it here. But right now I assume all of the errors that Discord would be returning is something that the user of the library would want to handle. So I just threw all of those.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but this is where using it here with a WinHTTP request, you could do a try and catch and be doing a lot of the same thing, right? You're just, well, no, you are using an exception there with the request because you'd have the same information available because it's in the object, right?
The HTTP request object doesn't throw any errors of its own.
Right.
So I can't really use catch on that.
Well, but you just use logic on the number, which is what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just saying that's it. you're using the throw, but you would still have all the same information that you have right there of the status, the response text, endpoint in your method anyway.
Right.
Anyway, okay, that's fine.
So one example of, or another example of where I use throw in here is in my class for Discord, there are some just generic "there was an error" events that can happen, and those get generated by the WebSocket library. So that would be if I just lost connection with Discord altogether.
Mm-hmm.
The user should provide code for what happens in that event. So all of mine does is it just throws an exception. The user's meant to override this and provide their own handling code. Because on error isn't something that they call. It's something that happens,
Mm-hmm.
It's called by the WebSocket library. So in this case, you would be handling it by replacing it with other code. And I have an example of where I'm doing that saved to my desktop here. So the default behavior is, I don't know what to do with this exception. Let's just show it on the screen for the developer.
Mm-hmm.
But then when the developer finishes implementing the library, they should have their own on-error handling. So here on the right is an example of code that's using my Discord library, and it specifies on-error file append. That way, instead of stopping the program, it puts it in some kind of error log. Another option here might be to send an email to me. So I can say, there was something wrong, but I don't know what. Come have me check on it and see what was wrong. And then again for close, if Discord closes it, that's probably not good. Maybe your connection got lost or something. In this code, it just reloads the script. But someone who spent more time on this than I did might be able to say, reconnect the WebSocket when it closes. Hook back up to Discord every time Discord kicks you out, or every time the connection drops. And I think that's most of the places that I've used throw in my more popular scripts.
Awesome. Thank you. Those are good. A lot of really good examples to help people conceptualize how they would use this, right?
Yeah.
Again, a lot of the stuff you're doing is great. It's advanced. To me, it's advanced stuff, right? But yeah, those are some really good examples to help people get it. Did anybody else have any questions on that? Did they follow what he was doing? I think there's some good examples there of how you can better track stuff for yourself, allow other people using your classes and libraries to, understand make decisions based on what happened. Get feedback from the class to make a decision on what you want to do. Now, one I have though is because I've at times used your Chrome class. How do I know that there's those error levels being reported? Do I have to go dive into the class to see that? Is that something I can monitor or just check easily?
The only two ways for you to know if a class method or some other library function could generate an exception is if the person who wrote the library documented that it could do that, or if you look at the code.
Okay.
And that's something that's a bit lacking in my documentation. I really should be saying what the error states for these functions are. But right now, it just assumes that you would know what the error states might be.
Cool. Those are some great examples.
It is. It really has been a great one on error handling, I'd say. Got great input, great examples. Really.
Did anybody else have any other questions or have a non-runtime error type error handling question? I know we're coming up right at the end of the second hour. I want to try to keep it somewhat on time. Yeah, Jim, thanks for your input earlier too. That was good additional comments. All right, I guess we're good. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jackie. This has been fun. Again, next month, the plan is for my IP lawyer to help talk through how we can protect ourselves and our software. I think that's going to be a good discussion. And that's it for now. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Cheers.
Cheers. Yeah.